Alex and Eric at Coram Farm. We are a year 4 Oklahoma flower farm that sells retail market bouquets from our roadside stand. Year 4, that's right. It is January, and that's typically January and February is when we make a lot of inside videos because there's not as much action going on outside on the farm to share with you. But it's also a great time to tackle a lot of just topics that you just are going to chat about rather than show a lot of visuals. And now that it's like mid-January and we are both in a lot of like flower farming Facebook groups, we noticed that there have been a lot of posts and questions about what should farmers be planning for in the future because of all of the chatter about tariffs and sanctions and what's going to happen and how is that going to affect the floral industry. And so in this video, Eric primarily is going to talk about what our thoughts are on the subject, generally high level, and then some specifics. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to share some of the comments that were made in our Facebook group of either questions or just comments a lot of our viewers have made on the subject and how they're feeling, what they think is going to happen, all of that. So
it is a charged topic.
It is a charged topic. So stick with us. I think it's worth it to just watch the video. Maybe even if you disagree, just listen and watch. And
I invite the polite conversation and not sensational conversation because I don't think we're going to tell you 100% what will happen or not happen. But I do want to put a more balanced take on it based upon my research over the past week on the topic. And we can have civil conversation about it.
I love civility.
Or, be a little bombastic. But we're obviously... we take a hard stance on a lot of opinions here on the farm, so we just tend to be a little more black and white and not just gray. So in general,
I should have worn a white shirt. And then it could have been black and white.
That's true. So I took some notes down here. So if you see me glancing down, I'm trying to stay a bit on script. So for those of you who are probably like, I don't even know what they're talking about to begin with, let's say, what is a tariff? The definition officially is a list or a system of duties imposed by a government on imported or exported goods. And then kind of the other thing to bring up here is a schedule of prices or fees is a tariff. So what's everyone talking about? Why don't you give the summary of like what you've heard?
Okay, yeah. So
as the current situation on this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like in the Facebook groups and like other content creation stuff, I've heard talk about like massive price increases because of these tariffs and the prices going up like 25-30%. Crates are now going to be $100 more than they were previously. Like everything's going to explode in cost. You might not be able to grow some crops anymore because they won't be profitable because they'll be so expensive. And long story short, we don't think that's going to happen, and that's kind of what we want to talk about and why we don't think some of those numbers that are being thrown around are actually going to come to fruition.
Yeah. So I know that just inaugurated President Trump has announced he's going to, I don't know, it's been wild ranges of numbers, everywhere from a 10% additional tariff on all imported goods to select industries or countries at 100%. And it's not really clear exactly what will come about as a result of this, but you have to understand that we currently already have a very complicated tariff system in place in all the international trade, and we have an entire system to govern all these different products coming in this country. So you already are paying for tariffed goods, especially since we're a very global economy. Nations are less important than the World Trade Organization is, and all those debates and stuff that occurs. It's an incredibly complicated system of, a lot of it is, it's jockeying for power and it's using it for negotiation power. I mean, it is a wild system.
The first point is there already are tariffs.
Right. And I'll have those details here.
Yeah, so we'll share those details, but there already are tariffs. Those are already priced into what we pay already. So it's not as if like we had no tariffs and then now, oh my gosh, we are doing tariffs. They already exist.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. There's
talk about that first.
There's a tariff schedule for most goods. There's a particular website you can go to right now. It's called the Harmonized Tariff Schedule website. I'll put a link up on it. It's like hts dot something something something. And I'll show some select stuff from the table in there. And there's a lot of data in there, so it takes a little bit to, I think, figure out what it's saying, because it's not easy for the average person to just look up a product and say, oh, okay, well, that's very clear what I'm going to pay then, or how a business might uptick their prices to cover that. And then there's also some interesting twist in there. There's two numbers usually. There's a what's called an NTR rate, and then there's a non-NTR. And this was a system that came about in the last 100 years where we kind of did this like most favored nation versus not. It was typically with European, we're in the most favored nation, and then like everybody else was not most favored nation. That system's been done away with. So they had this NTR system. NTR stands for normal trade relations. And it's a pretty big group. I think it's like 170 countries are in the normal trade relation category. And then there's everybody else. And that's where you'll see some probably higher tariff numbers. But those are things that probably we're trying to not trade with certain nations, and whether it's not a straight sanction, but it is a way to cripple some country trading or getting into the American market. And that's the non-NTR rate.
It's also a foreign policy tool.
Right, yeah. So it's like, you want to get the lower fees, you want access to the American market, then like here is what you have to do in order to participate.
Like stop bombing that country.
Yeah, stop doing X, Y, and Z, and then like you can become part of this World Trade Organization kind of thing. A lot of the establishment of the European Union had to do with this entire system, because they wanted to favorably compete with the US market, the monetary market. And so they all got together and said, like, we're one entity in trade.
Yeah. And
people are either in it or out of it. And you can look up specific schedules for goods. So I looked up some of these for flowers, so you can search the bar. So I pulled up the word flowers and bulbs and stuff like that. And the category of 0601 is a lot of what we're talking about here. I forgot what the number is. I think it's called like an MFN number, which might be a little bit off on that. But the particular one, and I'll have these on the screen, 0601.10.15. Tulip bulbs right now are at 89.6 cents per 1,000 bulbs. And then for the non-normal trade relation countries, that's $6 per 1,000. Just so we know, Netherlands are in the NTR rate, so you're paying about $1 per 1,000 right now. And another category is probably 0601.10.90. That's probably the one that would include ranunculus. They don't specifically call out ranunculus. They have a lot of other ones in there, and so I think they have like lilies specifically called out. Probably. A lot of different categories, so you can kind of look for your particular product and see exactly what it is. The other category is a little bit higher. It's 3.5%, and then a surprising 30% for a non-NTR country. So it's already at 30%. Then, of course, other people will be like, well, I'm not just talking about my flowers. I'm talking about other products, supplies, metals, textiles. And that might be the area that we see more, because the way this seems to be going is more targeted towards specific countries, and in particular China. So China obviously is a huge manufacturing country, and we lean on them probably too much for a lot of our goods, and a lot of American manufacturers can't compete with China. And so that's where we might see some impact to goods. So I looked up something like textiles or polypropylene. These are a couple other categories to see, what those amounts of tax are. I believe, so like this, this is where we start already getting into a lot of the interesting stuff. So if you buy entirely, your farm is entirely based upon Chinese goods and services or supplies. Let's just use a tax category of supplies.
Yeah.
You probably will see some uptick in the cost of those goods. Great opportunity to buy some other great products. I think you should just grab one of these trays, and we can talk about that story. DeWitt fabric, I believe, is made in the U.S. I didn't ask them specifically, but they're based out of Missouri, so they probably manufacture. But there's going to be a lot of geotextile fabrics that are not manufactured in the U.S., and you're going to get them from China. So again, let's find out which ones we can get from the U.S. and save the money. That's the whole point of this system. And we don't even know if we're going to see significant upticks in this. So the controversy, obviously, as we stated before, is like just a blanket increase in all tariffs. I highly doubt that's what it is. As far as the articles that I've read on the topic, that's more of like a, it's the art of the deal stuff.
Let's talk about that. So like that's a big part of the conversation is people are hearing what's being threatened or proposed or said, and then they're 100% assuming across the board, okay, well then that's just what's going to happen, and there's a freak out. But like,
that's highly unlikely, according to most people. That's just a tactic to kind of like shake and rattle some trade partners.
Yeah, it's like if you've ever negotiated, you start high and aggressive, and then it's whittled down in a negotiation to both parties kind of achieving what they want or what they can stomach and tolerate. And so honestly, for me, who's not like a big numbers person as much as Eric is, like mine is more like just stop listening to it and nothing has happened. And so much of this is fresh negotiation that I think it is unnecessarily worrisome if you're taking verbatim because also what's being thrown at the press is a tactic, because that's, I used to work in politics. And so like part of it is you say certain things to the press because they're going to report on it in a certain way. And those countries read our press. And it's like, it's kind of like a backhanded threat, the way they communicate, versus like the private phone calls, which we're not hearing in the negotiations and stuff. And so there's a lot of like tactics and maneuvering on the national stage that's happening right now. And we're taking that data and like trying to apply it to our like niche industry and freaking out.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So like, as far as all the analysis is, it's not going to be like the flower industry is not the targeted. I mean, the food industry in general might, but flowers aren't part of the food industry. So I know everyone, the much discussed avocado price increase. Mexico has been threatened with some pretty high blanket tariff increases. And again, I believe that is particularly because they want to change current situations with them with respect to immigration or drug trade.
It's a tactic.
So it's to say, we're just going to flat increase all products from you, X amount. And obviously behind the scenes, there's going to be a conversation to say, if you do X, Y, and Z, we won't implement a high tariff on your goods. And it gets them to do that stuff so that they can trade with us. So, I mean, like, this is...
And like you said, it's country specific more than not.
And Canada and Mexico, who are land neighbors to the U.S., are going to be obviously targeted from a lot of sensational language for particular reasons. China, obviously, is always something that President Trump will target and say, let's talk about how much is manufactured there and we want to impact trade with them. And like China already gets some pretty hammered, but it's usually select industries. So it's like electronics, it's toys and clothing. Those tend to be heavily manufactured in Asia, not just China, but a lot of other countries. Obviously, you can probably pull any one of your piece of clothing right now and look at it and say, oh, it's manufactured in the Philippines, Vietnam. So those are some areas that might get a hit of a higher rate in terms of tariffs. And I think the other one largely is going to be the auto industry in terms of that, because we want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and not just have it all done overseas. And that's the whole goal of what a tariff is. A tariff was, it's an old system. A lot of our founding fathers talked about it. Very much a Jeffersonian thing, correct?
Yeah, we had a lot of tariffs in the beginning.
In terms of how do you protect? I mean, a lot of the founding of this country was because of British policy on mercantilism. So there's a whole lot of background here, and it's very complicated in international relations. I haven't seen any article specifically saying, like, he's going after the Dutch flower industry in order to target that one as, a major source of pain that he can implement on a trade partner. That I've not seen any discussion of that.
Dutch.
Yeah, those darn Dutch. I mean,
it's like the 17th century again.
Right. So, I mean, like, we totally understand the fears. We know this is a razor-thin industry, so I'm not trying to be insensitive to people who've had a bad experience. Farming is a razor-thin industry, but, like, we've been on a certain path in farming in this country that has been troublesome for quite some time as we've transitioned from being a primarily agrarian society to a primary industrial society. And I'm reading a great book on this by Wendell Berry called The Unsettling of America. And it just talked about the height in the 30s. There was like 8 million farms in the US, and now we're down to less than 2 million. I mean, that's been a major change, and the farms have gotten bigger. And so it's just not a great story. It's not been done well, and we know it's really hard to be profitable in that. I think we saw the 2022 census that said that in general, only 42% of farms are profitable. And that's not flower farms. I don't even think that's a category that shows up much here in the U.S.
Percentage would be really small.
This is obviously the staple crops that the U.S. is known for.
But the point is, ag in our country has been going poorly for a very long time. So this is not like things are swimming, I'm just saying and now it's going to be destroyed.
Yeah, this isn't suddenly going to... And I mean, like, that's what you'll see. You'll see a lot of data about the lack of profitability in farm. It's been this way for a while. It's been a very hard industry. It's been heavily subsidized. And so the reasons for lack of profitability aren't going to be because of tariffs.
It's going to be
a lot of other practices.
Inflation.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing is, like, you will probably see the typical price increases. We already have the tulip price list.
Yeah, so I looked back in our notes because we tend to order the same varieties each year, and so it's easy to track apples to apples. And so last year from Ownings, I looked at a particular variety, we paid 31 cents a bulb for this particular tulip variety, and the prices for this year have already been released. The catalog is out, and it's 34 cents for that bulb. So that's 3 cents increase. That's not 25%.
Yeah, we're not paying 10 cents more per bulb.
Yeah. So it's an increase.
Right. And that, I mean, like, it's complicated because we live in inflationary times anyways. And so to try to separate out what is just typical inflation, because we live in a debt economy globally, so it's not a healthy environment monetarily. Right. So, I mean, it's just very complicated. And I think, the other thing to keep in mind is that because most companies are global or multinational, they're very interested in a no-duty system. They don't want to see any of this. Their special interest is going to be to publish tons of papers and commentary to say, tariffs are terrible. What we need is just free and open trade, because they just want access to every country and every market. And if you're a multinational corporation, that's all you want to do is keep expanding your market.
Pepsi wants to sell Pepsi in every country on Earth.
They don't want to pay any additional fees because it also is just complicated for their own pricing structures, and they have to have they have to go to their own, I'm sure they all have their complicated spreadsheets with their import and export
this is
duties.
Complicated enough.
So, everyone, and business always wants predictability. They want, they just want simplification. So obviously all of this is,
they don't want to know what to expect for their own projections.
Right.
Yeah.
It's often said, for those of you who took your MBA course, that a business doesn't actually care what the corporate tax rate is. They just want it to be stable, because that's just how they'll calculate their numbers. That's how you do future value of money calculations, all this fancy stuff. And I know some of you probably have taken those courses, and so you're aware of some of those calculations that occur, so that when you release pricing, you're accounting for a lot of these factors. And it is a tough world, and that's why there's a lot of accountants out there and a lot of people that have to do this analysis. A lot of tax lawyers. It is a very complicated system, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it is our take that we just need to take a deep breath. I think that it's not going to be particularly targeted at our industry. I think we'll see the normal year-over-year price increases going into 2025, 6, 7, and 8. I don't think we're going to see huge price increases, but there might be some products that you might want to not buy from. If you see suddenly a product that you got for half the price, but there was a U.S. supplier that you avoided, maybe it's time to buy that U.S. supplier. So, like, why don't you talk about the plug tray?
Well, this is an example. It's like Eric mentioned plastics and stuff from China. It's like, obviously they can produce super cheap products, and then we can buy them, and then we trash them, and then we buy them again, and then we trash them. But those are made overseas. They're cheap. It is filling our landfills. I do agree that we should be more considerate about how much we're turning over in the trash output that our farms are creating, and also where our products are being created. And so these trays that we have are from Bootstrap Farmer, which is a U.S. farm. We don't have any affiliation with them. I just had researched them and we use the product. But they're U.S. based, and more importantly, their manufacturing is U.S. based. So these trays are heavy duty trays, meaning they're not like disposable one and dones. So they're beefy, they're strong, they're really well designed, but they're made in the U.S., which means they're made by Americans.
Do you have the price off the top of your head, or at least an estimate of what these cost versus the normal trays?
But it's going to be a big difference, because like a super cheap, thin plastic trash tray is,
dirt cheap.
Whereas this is off the top of my head, it's maybe like $15 a tray. But, where it's probably like not even $1 for the plastic trays. But, then that's when you have to calculate how many you go through over time when you could have reuse, because these are going to last an incredibly long time. Just part of all of this too is a bit of like principle on supporting American companies that manufacture in America, that hire Americans, and it's keeping our money, kind of like circulating within our borders, rather than like everything going out. The money is going out to foreign companies. The money is going out to foreign workers and laborers, which, we could get into a conversation about labor conditions.
Well, you had that conversation in general. This might be a great opportunity for local specialty cut flower farmers to, outcompete the Colombia produced flowers that come pouring in.
Okay, well, so then that's another thing that you can talk about.
Well,
like the opportunity, I just mean like, when there is tension and there's price increases, that often can be a forcing mechanism to create an incentive to provide these services statewide to avoid those expenses. And like, there's going to be growing pains with everything. And I think we all like to live, and I know I like to live a risk-averse life, and growing pains are hard and you don't want to go through them. And so it's easier to kind of status quo it, even though there's like a giant tiger waiting at the end of the road for you. The tiger's not in front of you now. So you just want to like keep going with the way things are and not make changes. But a lot of the stuff that's been going on is not really sustainable economically. And there might be growing pains that happen to create more American-based industry and companies to innovate and provide these services and products, whether it's like the actual flowers themselves or it's the products we use in order to get those flowers, that long-term would be beneficial to our country, even if in like the 2026 spreadsheet, it feels hard.
Yeah. And I truly don't think this is going to impact the flower industry. I think it's going to be other more interesting industries, like the big one being talked about now is there's discussions of banning DJI drones in the country entirely.
China drones, yeah.
And so the U.S. actually doesn't really have any manufacturers for them, and they're actually, I think they're the few that exist are like 3 times the cost, and they're not as capable.
So there's some men right now trying to figure out
so it's like, well, how do we
make
produce? And I know that, but again, like these are all on like big ticket sensational items, like the whole, I think Steve Jobs talked about like the price of an iPhone versus like Foxconn versus an American produced one would cost 3 times the amount and stuff like that. But I mean, this is, I don't know, I'm becoming very aware on a farm of how much you can throw away. And I think it'd be interesting areas for innovation. Even from like the seed trays, where we're leaning a lot more on the shipped seed trays. Right. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the companies to, the Johnny Seeds and who is the one that we get all our
Farmer Bailey.
Farmer Bailey, sorry. Farmer Bailey, maybe all those suppliers to consider where they get their plastic trays from. And the styrofoam they put in their boxes and the amount of cardboard they use. It forces
reflection and then potentially innovation.
Yeah, so if we can get some changes, reduces waste in this industry and streamlines that, I think there'd be some great opportunities to, why can't a company that sells plugs grow them in a more durable tray and we return the trays? Would that be, I mean, maybe the logistics and fuel costs wouldn't work out, but, it'd be some interesting questions to ask instead of constantly throwing a lot of stuff away into the dumpster bin. It'd be great to, I think it would just be great to be a little more, a little more local, a little more reuse, a little less plastic. And maybe, maybe if prices do go up, I'll be incentivized to take care of the stuff I have a little bit because I don't want to rebuy plastics. I don't want to buy the DeWitt fabric again. So I want to take care of it a little bit better and fold it and organize it from year to year. Or, instead of throwing away your giant silage tarp, you will get that tape out and patch it up and keep using it as long as you can. And I know many of you probably already do all these initiatives to reduce the amount of plastic you put into your trash can, but
maybe
there's just a lot of plastics, and it would be good to figure out how to reduce and reuse all that stuff. So maybe there'll be some forcing function here on the plastics side so that we can, plastic's great. It helps us with tunnels. It helps us with silage, helps us with mitigating the weed pressure. It's a really great tool.
Of it.
Right. And so we're a big fan of stewarding God's creation here. So absolutely would love to see innovation and increased focus on how do we make things, reusable, longer lasting.
Yeah.
And I know many of you talk about this with like saving seed and stuff like that. And, this is where there's just that balance between what you can do realistically and be profitable and, what helps you on efficiency. And it's a bit of a challenge. We're obviously focused on efficiency here on the farm. And we understand that, there's kind of the pull of the industrial aspect of it with the nurture of it.
An opportunity for a US-based seed company so that we're not importing as much seed, so it's less about like, does every individual little farm need to do everything on their own, but will it create a forcing function and an incentive for an American-based company to do it? And then they're shielded from a lot of the stuff we're talking about here.
Again, I don't really think this is going to impact where we get our tulip bulbs from. I don't think ranunculus prices are going to go up. I don't know. You can almost put the link.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be a target area. I think that we can take a deep breath. And I think one of the cues to that, and I saw this in an article, and I think it was, one of the big globalist guys for like the Swiss bank or something like that was just kind of like, everyone needs to just chill out. We don't know. And I think President Trump he's not made any decisions on this. He's put some deadlines out here, I think, in the next couple of weeks, and they're really focused on Mexico, China, and Canada, which isn't really a flower source for us anyways. Yeah. And the fact that he hasn't just like in the first week passed an executive order increasing tariffs across the board means he's using this as a place to negotiate the favorable relations that are in the advantage of America. Yeah. And I know we've got a lot of international listeners, so obviously this doesn't apply to you as much, but feel free to leave your comments and thoughts on that.
One thing we haven't talked about, we're talking a lot about like materials and supplies, like the trays, the bulbs, the seeds. One thing that's interesting to note is the actual cut flower stems. We all know that like 80+% of all flowers purchased in the United States are imports. And we also saw during COVID when a lot of that shipping was shut down and there was a lot less access for like florists and big stores to buy those flowers, they turned local, and we had a huge like bloom, for lack of a better word, of local farms. And some growers that were around and established during COVID will say that that was some of their highest revenue time, because it was a forcing function for florists to look local and for also local people to value buying local more. And they started to question more their buying habits and where they're getting their products. And so on the actual stem, the final product step, I think that that would actually be really great to increase domestic purchasing. Well,
that's the answer right there. It's really funny to be for us to talk about localism.
Yeah.
And local flowers, and then when somebody says, "But I'm going to put a tariff on foreign goods," we say like, "Oh no, I can't be a local flower farm."
Yeah.
Like, well, what is local then? Like, what does that mean? And that's kind of that question I think we all need to ask ourselves. And I know it's tough. Again, like it's razor thin, and we lean on a lot of the efficiencies of globalism to make it work on the small scale that we have, that we can literally, anybody listening to this video can order up 3 trays from a nursery in wherever in the Northeast, that Farmer Bailey, Pennsylvania, you know, that they ship you ready to go plugs, and you can put them in around. You know, there's some of that amazing efficiency that you can get from not, like you said, not having to do it all yourself.
Yes.
But again, like localism, how do we increase to take the credit for being local?
Yeah.
You know, from the source of our products to the reuse to the people we hire and stuff like that. You know, what are we doing to be truly local?
Yeah, local isn't just the flower's roots were in American soil. Like there's more, you can be even more local in so many other ways. And local to mean your city, but then also your nation. We can be even more local than I think the industry is.
Right. While still allowing the trade where it's important.
Yeah.
Like Dutch tulips. Like, I mean, the Netherlands just grows
They're
tulips.
just really good at it.
And I mean, like and again, like it's unique in the world. It's not a nation that I think we're trying to
punish,
twist the arm of. And then in this particular industry, seems unlikely. Obviously, we can eat our words here in a couple of years.
Yeah,
but
we could.
I don't. Well, so why don't you just talk about some of the people's comments, pro and against? I think that kind of is our general thoughts. I'll put the links to the HTS website so you can poke around and see polypropylene products versus textiles. It's a bit of a matrix to sort through. So if any of you happen to be experts at Tariff, feel free to leave those comments about what you know about the system and how it might particularly work. So why don't you give us some of the kind of the back and forth that we've had on this, because I know it's going to have a lot of very strong feelings.
Yeah, well, so one comment, just because we just were talking about this, one comment mentioned in their own experience that they had contacted florists in their area about buying certain flowers that they grow, and they were just told that their florists only buy domestic imports for much cheaper, and they weren't interested. And so he's saying like this could be a really great forcing function and opportunity, kind of like during COVID, where florists are forced a bit to consider their buying habits and to look local, and then that's going to benefit the small scale flower farm world. So that could be a really, really good thing. One person said they think the biggest impact could be on the plastic oil-based side of things, like things that we get from China, trays, shipping containers, tarps, that sort of thing, rather than like what you're saying, things that we get from the Netherlands and Colombia and like other nations. Another comment was their biggest concern is that customers are going to have less disposable income to spend on flowers. And so like the buying capacity of customers might change.
Right. So so let's just say like the fears come to fruition, we have to bump prices up 25%. So instead of us selling at $25, we now have to charge $30 to be reasonably profitable. Again, I don't think that's going to be something we can do this year. Most of us will have already invested and those products already bought, the tulips already in the ground. So let's just say it's next year we have to bump prices up to 30. Again, the theory of tariffs, and at least what this administration has said, is to hope to reduce what the IRS takes from us and put it more on the trade. And then it's about trade-specific costs, not what you have in your pocket. So if you get more money, less taken from your income tax. But again, that's the theory. If it ends up being that all prices jack up and like nobody sees tax relief, obviously we're wrong. And it's going to be tight times, and that's
going to be horrible for them politically, which also is all involved.
Yeah. So like if all the theories here, and again, like remember, tariffs and all the analysis that we see today is written by complete global trade desiring bias. Like it wants free and open trade as the best means to securing wealth. It's wealth centric. It's money centric. It's very capitalistic. It's not people centric. It's not nation centric. And so like all the analysis is just going to be these companies want access to markets without tariffs all around the world. And this is the old school of like protectionism. Like, can you protect your nation's trade internally in favor of it all being imported? And can you change that balance?
So another person said, she didn't have opinion, but and she reminded me of comments that I had heard in other things that I think is causing people to panic a bit. She had said, I'd love to hear a better perspective as to what's actually happening, not doom and gloom things, or like we're about to be kicked out of trading with the EU. That was said, that we were going to be kicked out of trading with the EU. And they just want more information. We're not going to be kicked out of trading with the EU. The United States funds like a majority of what Europe is doing half the time. So again, this is geopolitics. This is muscle flexing.
I haven't seen any language that's like, I'm going after the EU.
Yeah.
It's China, Mexico, and Canada. In particular, China, because they manufacture a ton of stuff.
The comment was that like the EU is going to be so mad at us. They're going to like kick us out. And I'm like, that's not... You know, as flower farmers, we're like thinking about our crop plan and our budgets. We're not thinking about like international trade relations and geopolitics. So we're just like taking data points and trying to apply it to our plans. But really what's happening is just a lot of like rooster chest puffing and like circling each other, not what is actually going to end up happening, which is again why we want this video to sound truly optimistic to you of like deep breath, exhale. A lot of these things are not going to happen. That's either being threatened back and forth, either direction.
Right.
Let's see. Yeah, okay. So someone had said they're farmers and the last tariffs that were assessed against China caused permanent damage. And during those wars, China went to other markets. And then when those tariffs were lifted, they didn't come back to our market. And so there was like a permanent
Did they say
what
there? Particular product?
No, it just said farmers. But they didn't return. I'm assuming it's a consumable farm product because that's what our ag is. It's cotton. Well, that's not consumable, but it's cotton, it's corn, it's soy, it's that kind of stuff. They're just saying that like that loss was never recovered. But then another person chimed in as a counter, and they're a rancher, and they said that it was actually beneficial to them because American grown beef is better. It's better quality. It caused people to purchase from them and to look locally. And it actually helped smaller farms and ranches during that time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great times we live in. And like a lot of people have seen these stories and testimonies where people are trying to trade within the existing systems and like ranches in particular. I watched a YouTube video on a farm in, I think it was North Carolina. And it was a young couple. I think they lived in California. And they took over a family farm. It was a big ranch, and they tried to sell at the normal cattle markets, and like they weren't being profitable. And they went to a direct consumer method using the power of the internet and advertising, and became wildly profitable in doing that. They were able to cut out the middleman. They were able to sell their beef at a premium. And a lot of Oklahoma's got a lot of people that are trying to do that as well, where if they have the marketing moxie, they can get the direct-to-consumer model and cut through the middleman. And I think those are great opportunities that we have. It's the same thing you and I are doing. We're trying to cut out, we don't do the wholesale. I know that a lot of you do. Again, I still think you're going to have opportunities here.
Another person said, you just need to add 25% to everything you buy. And it's like, no.
Yeah, I don't.
That's no. Another person did mention.
I've not even seen, I've seen 100% apparently was threatened against China alone, but it just doesn't seem reasonable. And there's some products that have heavy tariffs already in the system, and they weren't changed under Biden, and I don't even know when some of them were established. Like I saw some 60%.
And it's not going to be a priority for Trump to be changing those either, and what he's trying to achieve right now politically. Another person did mention again that and I don't know if we've talked about this or I've talked about it with you, but the Dutch have just been having really bad tulip harvests for the last couple of years, whether it's like late rains, too much rain, not enough rain. It's just a mess. And so also like if we are seeing some increases, like we can't now just all pivot to like blaming everything on tariffs.
Yeah,
because there's going to be other increases.
Yeah, how do you extract out and analyze whatever? Yeah. You can literally just look and see if the tariff went up. But again, like that's going to be such a lag in terms of its impact. You won't see it this year.
Correct.
You would see it next year. And like you said, how would you extract out, if you only looked at the change in the cost of a bulb from a supplier
Right.
that was imported, whether through Ball or Ownings and
Right.
stuff like that, how would you really know if it's not just a bad year, it's not just typical inflationary increases that are usually like 5% every year at this point, maybe even higher in a lot of countries. And so it would be very difficult. And like the only way you could say it was a direct relation is to look at the HTS website and say like, it went from this to this. And then I did an analysis, and like people do this. So there's entire think tanks that are going to come up with reports in select industries. They're not going to focus on flower farming.
Yeah, it makes it
And
harder.
these reports come up.
Yeah.
And so you would have to do it yourself. And actually the burden of proof would be on you that I saw that it went from 89.6 cents per 1,000 bulbs to $1.45, and here's how that impacted me in terms of my product costs. And I mean, that's a hard lift to just say like it was directly because of a tariff.
Yeah. But to conclude, as like a actionable takeaway, like there is going to be such a lag with this because like we're still in the negotiating puff chest phase. And even when it's implemented, there's going to be a lag in feeling it. And so for people that like you really do feel stressed, like my advice would be to just focus on your growing season. Like walk away from the spreadsheets and the projections and the analysis, and you already have your crop plan, you know, made for this year. You've probably bought most of your things for this year. Like just focus on having a really great growing and selling season on your farm, and let some of this like shake out and sieve through until you pick it back up again to make some, you know, projections and stuff for the following year.
And all the same principles. Again, 43% of farms are profitable. And why is that?
Yeah.
What principles, and isn't just flower farming, what are you tracking your expenses? Are you controlling them? Are you saying no to purchases when you should be? You should be having an attitude of saying no.
But also you
and
don't produce beautiful flowers if you're angry. So
Don't
be an angry
water your flowers with tears.
That's right. Don't be an angry flower farmer. Create beautiful things, sell beautiful things with a joyful, cheerful heart. It'll be okay.
High quality products.
Do we end with a secret word?
Be cordial in your disagreement. We don't have a problem with disagreement. We just have a problem when people get
Mean.
overly emotional and mean about it. So,
What's your secret word?
my secret word is going to be...
We try to do ones that have an emoji too, because that's more fun.
It could be the recycle icon.
There you go.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah.
I laughed at it when I was young, but I do get it on a farm.
How wasteful
Reuse.
it can get. Yeah.
Very wasteful. Let's try to reuse.
Yeah. So you can either say reuse, or for those
Put the little
the emoji.
the little recycle icon.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah. I hope you feel better. I hope it was informative. And we appreciate it. And again, we welcome discussion in the comments. Let's just be civil and kind to everyone. So,
Yeah.
see you in the next video.
All right. See you guys.
You want me to launch us like usual? Yeah, I'll launch us.
Let's do this.
Put that in bloopers at the end.
Should I launch you or what?
Yeah.
We need like a
Breaking news.
breaking news
We're about to lose a bunch of followers.
or gain a lot. All marketing is good marketing.
Patriot or globalist? Vote in the comments. Okay. Do it live. Ready?